Something happened on the battlefield in Kursk that most people barely noticed. But Iran did. And what Iran saw there may have already changed the balance of power far beyond Ukraine. Because what we are witnessing right now is not just the transfer of weapons, it is the transfer of knowledge, tactics, and battlefield experience, something far more dangerous than any single missile or drone. On the surface, Kursk was just another front in a long and exhausting war. Russia was under pressure, Ukraine was pushing forward, and both sides were adapting in real time. But beneath that chaos, something else was being tested. Russia was not just fighting for territory, it was experimenting. It was refining a new kind of warfare, one that blends drones, electronic disruption, and precision coordination into a system that is difficult to counter. This is where things start to change. Because Russia's battlefield in Ukraine has become something like a laboratory, a place where modern warfare is being redefined under real combat conditions. And one of the most important developments coming out of that environment is the rapid evolution of drone warfare. Russia has built entire units dedicated to unmanned systems, treating drones not as support tools, but as a central pillar of its military strategy. These are not basic drones anymore. They are coordinated, layered, and increasingly intelligent systems designed to overwhelm defenses, confuse radar systems, and strike critical targets with precision. Some of these systems have evolved directly from Iranian designs, like the Shahed drones, which Russia has modified and upgraded into its own versions. But here is where the story takes a different turn. Because the relationship between Russia and Iran is no longer one-directional. It is no longer just Iran supplying drones and Russia using them. It has become a feedback loop. A system where both countries are learning from each other, adapting and improving. And that is where Kursk becomes important. What Russia learned in Kursk about drone coordination, electronic warfare, and battlefield integration is now being shared. Not officially, not publicly, but through intelligence exchanges, tactical cooperation, and technological support. Reports indicate that Russia has been providing Iran with advanced drone tactics, including how to deploy drone swarms, how to select strike angles, and how to overwhelm defensive systems. These are not small upgrades. These are battlefield-tested strategies developed under real combat conditions. And Iran is already using them. In recent conflicts, Iranian forces have begun deploying drones in ways that closely resemble Russian tactics in Ukraine. Coordinated strikes, layered attacks, and precision targeting have become more common. This is not coincidence. This is adaptation. But it goes even deeper. Russia is not just sharing tactics. There are indications that it is also providing satellite intelligence, giving Iran real-time data on U.S. military positions and movements. That kind of information changes everything. It turns a reactive force into a proactive one. It allows for planning, timing, and execution at a level that would otherwise be impossible. And this is where the Pentagon starts to become concerned. Because what used to be a regional threat is now evolving into something much larger. Iran is no longer operating with limited capabilities. It is operating with enhanced systems, informed by one of the most active battlefields in the world. This is not about a single weapon. This is about a system of warfare. A system that combines drones, intelligence, electronic disruption, and coordinated strikes into a single operational framework. And once that framework is established, it can be replicated, it can be adapted, and it can be deployed in different regions. That is exactly what is happening now. Russia's experience in Ukraine is no longer contained within that conflict. It is spreading. It is influencing how other countries think about warfare, how they design their strategies, and how they prepare for future confrontations. Iran is one of the first countries to fully absorb those lessons, and that creates a new kind of threat. Because unlike Russia, Iran is operating in a completely different geopolitical environment. It is positioned in the Middle East, close to key shipping routes, energy corridors, and U.S. military bases. When advanced tactics developed in Ukraine are applied in that environment, the impact is multiplied. This is where the title begins to make sense. Kursk weapon is not a single weapon. It is a concept. It represents everything Russia learned in that battlefield, how to fight smarter, faster, and more efficiently using modern systems. And now, that concept is being transferred. Iran is not just copying Russia, it is evolving with it. And that is what makes this situation so dangerous. Because once knowledge starts moving between countries like this, it becomes very difficult to contain. It does not stay in one region. It spreads, it adapts, and it creates new challenges that are harder to predict. The Pentagon understands this, because for years, U.S. military strategy has been built around technological superiority. Advanced systems, precision strikes, and layered defenses have been the foundation of that strategy. But what happens when those systems are challenged by low-cost, highly coordinated drone attacks combined with real-time intelligence? The answer is uncertainty. And uncertainty is the one thing military planners try to avoid. Right now, that uncertainty is growing. Because Iran is not just receiving equipment, it is receiving experience. It is learning from a war that is shaping the future of combat. And that learning process is accelerating. Every strike, every response, every adjustment becomes part of a larger system of knowledge. And that system is expanding. And as this system of knowledge continues to expand, the real shift begins to appear in how power is being projected. Because traditionally, military strength was measured through large-scale assets, fighter jets, aircraft carriers, heavy artillery, and advanced missile systems. But what Russia has demonstrated in Ukraine, particularly in areas like Kursk, is that power can now be distributed differently. It can be decentralized, adaptive, and far more difficult to counter using conventional defense systems. This is the core transformation that Iran has been observing. Because for a country like Iran, matching the United States in terms of traditional military strength has never been realistic. The gap in terms of budget, technology, and global reach is simply too large. But what if that gap no longer matters in the same way? What if warfare is shifting towards systems that do not require massive investment, but instead rely on coordination, adaptability, and real-time intelligence? That is exactly what Russia has been testing, and that is exactly what Iran is now learning. In Kursk, Russian forces were forced to adapt quickly. They were facing continuous pressure, evolving threats, and a battlefield that changed almost daily. Under those conditions, traditional strategies were not enough. What emerged instead was a layered approach, one that combined drones for reconnaissance, drones for attack, electronic warfare systems to disrupt communications, and rapid coordination between units. This approach does not rely on overwhelming force. It relies on efficiency. And efficiency changes the equation. Because when a system becomes efficient enough, it can challenge even the most advanced defenses. It can exploit gaps, overwhelm response times, and create situations where even technologically superior forces struggle to maintain control. This is where the Pentagon's concern begins to grow, because the United States has built its defense strategy around dominance. Dominance in air, sea, space, and cyber domains. But dominance depends on predictability. It depends on knowing what kind of threat is coming and preparing for it accordingly. What Russia has introduced, and what Iran is now adopting, is a form of warfare that is much harder to predict. Drone swarms do not behave like traditional aircraft. Electronic disruption does not follow conventional attack patterns. And when these elements are combined, they create a system that is flexible, fast, and difficult to counter in real time. Iran has already started integrating these lessons. Recent patterns show increased use of coordinated drone deployments, improved targeting accuracy, and more strategic timing of operations. These are not isolated improvements. They are part of a broader shift in how Iran approaches military engagement. And the timing of this shift is critical, because it is happening in a region where tensions are already high. The Middle East is not a stable environment. It is a region where multiple conflicts overlap, where strategic interests collide, and where even small changes can have significant consequences. When a country like Iran enhances its capabilities in this environment, the impact is not limited to a single front. It affects everything. Shipping routes become more vulnerable, military bases become more exposed, allied forces have to adjust their strategies, and the cost of maintaining stability increases. This is what makes the transfer of knowledge from Russia to Iran so significant. It is not just about improving one country's capabilities, it is about altering the dynamics of an entire region. And once those dynamics change, They are difficult to reverse. At the same time, this development is being watched closely by other countries. Because if this model of warfare proves effective, it will not remain limited to Russia and Iran. Other states will begin to study it, adapt it, and implement it in their own ways. This creates a ripple effect, one where a single innovation leads to widespread change. And that ripple effect is already beginning. What started as a response to battlefield conditions in Ukraine is now evolving into a broader strategic framework. A framework that emphasizes adaptability, efficiency, and coordination over sheer scale. This is the future of conflict that is starting to take shape, and it is not happening in theory, it is happening in real time. Every engagement, every adjustment, every lesson learned adds to this evolving system. And the more it evolves, the more effective it becomes. For the Pentagon, this presents a complex challenge, because countering this kind of threat requires a different approach. It is not enough to rely on existing systems. New strategies have to be developed. New defenses have to be designed. And most importantly, new ways of thinking about warfare have to be adopted. This is not an easy transition, because military institutions are built around established doctrines. Changing those doctrines takes time. It requires testing, validation, and integration into existing systems. And during that process, there is always a gap, a period where adaptation is still in progress. That gap is where vulnerability exists. And that is exactly where this new form of warfare is most effective. Iran understands this, because it has spent years operating under pressure, developing asymmetric strategies, and finding ways to challenge stronger opponents. What Russia has provided is not a complete transformation, but an enhancement, an upgrade to an already existing approach. And that combination is what makes it dangerous, because it brings together experience from one of the most active battlefields in the world with a strategic mindset that is already focused on adaptability. This is not just about improving capabilities, it is about accelerating evolution. And when evolution accelerates, the balance of power shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Until one day the difference becomes clear. This is the stage we are entering now. A stage where traditional advantages are being challenged by new methods. Where technological superiority is being tested by strategic efficiency. And where the definition of power itself is beginning to change. Because power is no longer just about what you have, it is about how you use it. And right now, what Russia developed in places like Kursk is showing that there are new ways to use power, ways that are more flexible, more adaptable, and in many cases, more effective. Iran is taking those lessons and applying them in its own context. And that is where the global implications begin to expand. Because this is not just a regional development, it is part of a larger shift. A shift in how conflicts are fought, a shift in how strategies are designed, and a shift in how power is projected. These shifts do not happen in isolation. They influence each other, they build on each other, and over time, they reshape the entire system. This is why what happened in Kursk matters, not because of a single event, not because of a single weapon, but because of what was learned there, and where those lessons are going next. Because once knowledge moves, it does not stay contained. It spreads, it evolves, and it changes everything it touches. Right now, those changes are still unfolding. They are still being understood, still being analyzed, but the direction is becoming clearer. And if this trajectory continues, the next phase will not just be about adaptation, it will be about confrontation. A confrontation shaped not by traditional weapons alone, but by systems, strategies, and knowledge that are being built right now. And by the time those systems are fully understood, they may already be in use, not just in one region, but across multiple fronts. That is the real story behind what happened in Kursk, and that is why it matters far more than it appears on the surface.